Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly. This is the show for March 30th, 2018. I am recording this episode a day early here in Denver on Thursday because tomorrow morning, Darlene, the Yorkie Claire, and I will be flying Southwest Airlines nonstop to Boston for a 19-day stay in Cambridge and in Maine. While preparing for the trip, I had time to do 2 interviews this week. You will hear the first one with Otis Chandler on today's episode, and next week you will hear from mystery writer Elizabeth George. I always love catching up with Otis Chandler, co-founder and CEO of Goodreads. Without planning it, we spoke 2 days before the 5th anniversary of the announcement that Goodreads was going to be acquired by Amazon. Since then, the social media site for book lovers has seen spectacular growth, and its CEO continues to pursue a highly original vision for the crucial role of books and reading.
People often use the phrase social reading to describe this, and I hate that phrase.
Also this week, we will return to Austin, Texas for A Tale of Two Authors published by 2 very different publishers, Thomas & Mercer, an imprint of Amazon Publishing, and Dutton, an imprint of the biggest of the big 5 publishers, Penguin Random House. What they had to say to each other and to an audience that included me and my cousin Peter may surprise you. In news this week is a story that sent Amazon's stock price tumbling by more than 10%, with a resulting paper loss of more than $10 billion for CEO Jeff Bezos. It recovered some after falling that much, but that's the impact of this story. Jonathan Swan, writing Wednesday, March 28th in a political newsletter named Axios, reported that President Trump is, quote, obsessed with Amazon and has, according to a source, quote, wondered aloud if there may be any way to go after Amazon with antitrust or competition law. Here is audio from a CNBC interview with Jonathan Swan following a White House spokesman's comment about his Axios story.
She didn't contradict anything in my story, and what she says is very carefully worded and accurate. They do not have any specific policies that they are pushing forward with as of this minute. But what I reported wasn't that. It was that Trump is obsessed with Amazon. That's in the words of the source who's spoken with him at length about the company, and keeps bringing it up. When they talk about antitrust law or anything about media mergers, he'll out of nowhere bring up Amazon. Is there any way we can use antitrust law to crack down on Amazon? He talks about making Amazon pay their fair share of taxes. That's something that he brings up. It's not very well-formed thoughts. He has this instinctive, deep-seated feeling, which has been reinforced by some of his wealthy friends, that Amazon is being subsidized by the U.S. Postal Service. He believes that Amazon is killing bricks-and-mortar retail businesses, grocery stores. To what degree is this related to the fact that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, which is often critical of the president? Well, he does bring up Bezos as well, and he views the Washington Post as Bezos' political weapon, so it's definitely part of it. So what do you think? So what happens then? If Sarah Sanders says nothing's being considered, right, is he just going to complain in private to his friends, or is it possible that we're going to see actually something? I mean, when you talk about antitrust and him saying if antitrust legislation could be used, it harkens to Time Warner and AT&T and the beef with CNN. Well, it's not just his friends. He brings it up in Oval Office meetings with staff and repeatedly. But no, that again, there are no plans that exist currently. But that doesn't mean that there won't be. That we shouldn't assume that he won't do anything and then it's all bluster. Because when he does get fixed on something, and Amazon is very much an issue that he is fixed on. It's a feeling that he's held for some time, and it's something that he keeps repeating. You never know where that could end up in terms of policy.
By comparison, Swan says, President Trump has little to say about Facebook. Actually has sort of positive feelings toward Facebook, even with its current controversy with massive misuse of members' data, apparently.
Trump views business in a very old-fashioned way. He views tangible assets. He understands tangible assets, whether they be physical mail delivery, groceries, bricks and mortar stores. And Amazon is much more of a direct threat, or at least has been, to those industries. He hears from his real estate friends that it's killing them. So it's much more easy for him to grasp the effect that Amazon's having.
The background of this simmering face-off between President Trump and Jeff Bezos was highlighted in a clip from a CNBC panel that I came across this week. The reference to FANG stocks, that's an acronym for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, which is now actually named Alphabet.
As if the FANGs didn't have enough to worry about, there is that new report by Axios saying the president, quote, hates Amazon, is wondering if there's a way to go after the company, something, as all of you know, he has done often, at least verbally.
He owns Amazon. He wants political influence so that Amazon will benefit from it. That's not right. And believe me, if I become president, oh, do they have problems.
Amazon is getting away with murder tax-wise. He's using the Washington Post for power so that the politicians in Washington don't tax Amazon like they should be taxed. Make sure the Internet, they're going to have to start paying sales tax because it's very unfair what's happening to our retailers all over the country.
All right, so Jim, look, there's the Axios story talks about the president's real estate friends saying these guys are killing the malls, they're killing our businesses. Maybe the most significant line in the whole story is a source who's spoken to POTUS. This is straight from the article. He's wondering aloud if there may be any way to go after Amazon with antitrust or competition law.
Which has always been the big fear with the company. But, it was interesting as we were listening to those comments. I was in the upper left. I was looking at the dates, February of 2016, May of 2016. Here we are in March of 2018. The point that I'm driving at, and this is to what Pete and Kerry were saying, is why now? Why all of a sudden now is the stock responding? Why all of a sudden now is the market in general responding? Facebook, Netflix, Tesla, Amazon, I've argued for a long time they've been overpriced. But why now? I mean, Amazon's been on a straight tear up. The answer is, guys, it's almost like a Jenga tower that just got too unstable. One little piece is taken out of the bottom and the whole thing wobbles and falls down. Now, that does not mean that we are having a market crash. This is a correction, okay? You're seeing ETF outflows.
Hold on. Also, everything that was just in that clip is a lie. Users of Amazon pay sales tax in every state where it's applicable, is number one. Number two, Amazon is now the second largest employer, probably the biggest hirer in America, creating those jobs that the president likes to celebrate. Number three, not a monopoly, because if you actually look at their share of overall retail and not just e-commerce, it's not even close to being anything that's controlling the whole industry, although I will say that their technology is driving people to do more for their consumers, which I can't imagine you would say is a negative.
You want Amazon to be in a position where they're forced, if the administration does take some sort of action, where they have to prove everything that you just said?
I will have links to these stories in the show notes, along with a long piece at Business Insider, which is partly owned by Jeff Bezos, titled, If Trump Wants to Take a Shot at Amazon, There's a Potential Billion-Dollar Deal Staring Him Right in the Face. It's by Alan Smith, and it highlights a multi-billion-dollar Defense Department contract, which many insiders quoted in the article believe Amazon's web services platform at this point, quote, has the inside track for winning. The timing of this contract is fraught because within the next few weeks is when the Defense Department will submit to Congress its request for proposals, and this could be a $10 billion 10-year contract to provide the military with cloud services. Amazon's status as the perceived frontrunner for the contract has been largely cemented by a $600 million deal with the CIA in 2013. This is reading from the Business Insider article. The new project is called Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure Cloud Initiative, or JEDI, and it says that bidders must be able to obtain those security credentials, the ones that Amazon already has, within 9 months of winning the contract. So that gives AWS a leg up. Some of this seems to be almost orchestrated, or at least coincidental. There was an ad placed earlier this week in the New York Post highlighting the possible deal. This is the Defense Department deal, and it warns your Defense Department is set to award a no-bid 10-year contract for all its IT infrastructure to administration enemy Jeff Bezos' Amazon. And this is a full-page ad in the newspaper that has a picture of Jeff Bezos walking down a hallway with the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Mattis, and it says, Mr. President, thank you for the $100 billion handout. The cash will really help my many efforts to oppose your administration's policies. Your pal, Jeff Bezos, Amazon, and the Washington Post," and a picture of Bezos laughing. So this is getting pretty raw and pretty public at this point. And if the heat gets cranked up at a time when this big deal moves through Congress, that could be something that might have a lot more effect on Amazon, at least in the short term, than these vague threats about antitrust enforcement or action of that nature. This article ends with an interesting observation, setting this in context. Regardless of whether Trump decides to go down this path to take a swing at Amazon or focuses on antitrust enforcement or new legislation about sales tax collection, observers are expecting a fight. Quote, "If reincarnation exists, then Teddy Roosevelt has returned as Donald Trump and John Rockefeller as Jeff Bezos," one Republican strategist told Business Insider, alluding to the former president's trust-busting crusade at the beginning of the 20th century. Quite a story. This week's revival of the Trump versus Bezos battle also revives my speculation that the location of HQ2, Amazon's new corporate headquarters, could possibly be a big chip for Amazon to play in the high-stakes game that's unfolding. 3 of the top 20 locations for HQ2 are in the Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia, Maryland's Montgomery County, and the District of Columbia. And that makes the Washington region the only area in the final 20 to have 3 separate possibilities listed. The urban theorist Richard Florida was quoted in a January 20th Washington Post article as saying, quote, "I think their eyes are on D.C. For Amazon, it solves a lot of problems." In addition to owning the Post out of his own personal funds, separate from Amazon, Jeff Bezos a year ago purchased a $23 million home in the district. I think it's possible or maybe even probable that the optics of a president making real as opposed to rhetorical moves against a company that did decide to bring 50,000 jobs to the D.C. area could be problematic, but you never know. One Amazon executive you don't hear much about is Jay Carney, who 3 years ago was hired as vice president for worldwide corporate affairs and whose title has since then been upgraded to simply senior vice president corporate affairs. Carney spent 20 years as a journalist at Time magazine and 3 years as press secretary in the previous administration. When news of his hiring was reported by Politico, the plan was apparently for Carney to divide his time between Washington, D.C. and Seattle. I wouldn't be surprised if these days he's spending more and more time in the nation's capital, and that he is right in the middle of how, if at all, Amazon will be responding to the president's concerns in the coming weeks and months. One thing for sure, there won't be any more lighthearted tweets by @Jeff Bezos to reserve a seat for Trump on the Blue Origin rocket with a hashtag of Send Donald to Space. That tweet was posted on December 7th, 2015, after candidate Trump had tweeted unfounded charges that, quote, the @Washington Post, which loses a fortune, is owned by @Jeff Bezos for purposes of keeping taxes down at his no-profit company @Amazon. And so it goes. For the tech tip, I want to pass along a smart suggestion from the manager of the Amazon pop-up store at the new Whole Foods store here in downtown Denver. Krista Selby was on duty the other day when I brought my 16-gigabyte Fire HD8 tablet that I had bought in June of last year. I've been having odd problems with reading Kindle books on this tablet. For example, when I highlighted a word to look it up, I would often receive a message that the dictionary had not been downloaded. There was a link to tap to start the download, and it would complete in under a minute, but it was a pain to have to do that over and over instead of just have the dictionary on the tablet once and for all. I was also having trouble once in a while opening books down from the archive after I had bought them. I'd have to tap several times to open them. Krista said the problem might be the settings I'd chosen for the 64-gigabyte micro SD card that I'd added to the tablet. She showed me how to go to settings on the tablet, then storage, where I could turn off 2 of the SD card-related options: download audiobooks to your SD card and download books and periodicals to your SD card. When I turned those off, I had no more problems. I can still use the SD card for automatically downloading movies, TV shows, music, and photos to the card, and they take up a lot of space, so it's nice to have them on the SD card. Otis Chandler and his wife, Elizabeth Curry, sold their startup social media site Goodreads to Amazon 5 years ago when Goodreads membership stood at 16 million. When the Amazon purchase was first announced 5 years ago this week, some naysayers at the time predicted that Goodreads members would flee in droves. Instead, membership grew to 20 million within 4 months. Last September, at the 10-year anniversary of its founding, Goodreads boasted a worldwide membership of 65 million. I caught up with Otis on Monday of this week, March 26th. Suzanne Skyvara, who is Global Consumer Communications Executive at Goodreads, suggested we use Amazon's Chime video conferencing tool, and I was glad to do so. She initiated the call, and within a few minutes, she was able to email me an MP3 file with very good audio quality. I began by asking Otis for an update on where Goodreads membership stands now.
I can't actually believe it's been 5 years to the week. That's impressive. And I think you and I have spoken a few times, but not in a few years in that time frame.
Exactly.
And yeah, the Goodreads keeps growing. It's amazing. People keep reading lots of books out there in the world, and they keep finding us and figuring out how we help them do what we do, which is help people find and share good books. And I think we're now up to 75 million registered members who've shelved over 2.2 million books on their profiles.
Wow. And is in the recent year or so, compared to the growth in the first part of those 5 years, is it mainly international, or is there any kind of an area that is really driving your growth at this point compared to what it was 5 years ago?
The world does keep shifting. So international has grown more. We're I think half U.S., half international, half non-U.S. site countries, and people use Goodreads from all over the world, even though we're not localized. And the other trends are mobile. Mobile was a hot thing coming 5 years ago, and now it's we're trying to develop our mobile apps and putting a lot of effort into those versus our desktop. And then the third area is Kindle. We joined Kindle in order to help create what the future of reading plus social can look like. And we continue to invest there. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But there's a lot of great stuff we've done in our Kindle integration.
When you joined Amazon, I'm sure you had some hopes and expectations as to the benefits of being part of Amazon as opposed to proceeding on your own. And at this point, 5 years later, have there been any surprising benefits to having become part of such a much bigger company that you didn't foresee when you and your wife first made the decision to be acquired by Amazon?
We've had a particular dream for a long time, which is, the Goodreads mission is help people find and share good books. And we know that a lot of people would buy books, read books, and just forget about coming back to Goodreads to talk about them, share them, and then find their next read. And for the segment of people who did remember to do that, they found a lot of value in it, and they invited friends, and they, our NPS scores are very, very high. People love recommending Goodreads to friends.
What's an NPS score?
Net Promoter Score. It's a standard way of just saying, do you recommend this product? And if enough people say yes to that question, then you get a high NPS score. And Amazon has one of the highest NPS scores out there because everybody loves getting stuff delivered to their door in 2 days, right? But it's a good way of just measuring a brand affinity. Do people like a brand? If they like it, they'll recommend it to their friends. And people love recommending Goodreads. Anytime books come up and it's like, have you read this? Have you read that? Where do I find more book recommendations? Oh, you should check out Goodreads. In addition to helping more people return to Goodreads after reading a book, the Amazon connection had some other benefits. I mean, the thing there is just the scale of it that has been impressive. Kindle is only a piece of Amazon, and the Kindle business in which we've been spending a lot of time integrating is huge. And so small little features like just, integrating into the Kindle, when you finish a book, now you can easily share it to Goodreads. Suddenly tons more people are sharing what they're reading to their friends through Goodreads and finding, downstream engagement opportunities to discuss that book or find books through their friends who have already done that. I have a dream that everybody will share everything they read. And tell me if this sounds contentious to you, but I think that if people really did that, if they shared everything that they read and what they thought of it, I think the world would be a much better place. I think the rate of learning and kind of human learning would greatly accelerate. And I recognize we'll never get to 100% of that. But I think the more we can do of that, I think it's just better for people.
Well, I like it because the idea of sharing personally what I read with other people, there's some kind of an antidote to the just the tsunami of opinions coming at me from everywhere. But it's a more personal dream you've got there, where each of us, when we read a book, reaches out to people that we care about and share stuff. That might change the world.
We like to say our mission is to help change the world kind of one reader at a time by helping them find their next good read, their next favorite book.
Well, you continue to dream big. I'm glad after 5 years, you haven't just become a corporate drone that is not dreaming way out of the box.
No, I think if anything, it's amazing at how much more there still is to do. 5 years in, and you would think I would have done it all, but Jeff Bezos likes to say to have a day one mentality. We're at day one of, and he says that about Amazon, which for a company that size, it feels hard to say that company would be at day one. But I think in terms of what we can do for books, for reading, for conversation around big ideas, I think we're at day one.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, let's dig into some of the cool Kindle integration that you've done. I've been so pleased to see that the notes and highlights now can come over to Goodreads. And it seems like you've made some decisions that I think make sense, because they're all there available, but I have to proactively say, yes, I want to share these notes and highlights, and I can do them all at once. What I do is I go down and I make sure, sometimes I make a note in a book that I'm peeved at something, and I just want to share it mainly for myself, and I have to look at some of those before I put them out to the people that are in my community and Goodreads. But maybe talk a little bit about, in general terms, how that came about, what's most exciting to you about that integration with notes and highlights with the Kindle at this point.
Yeah, so Kindle Notes and Highlights has become, in the last year and a half since we launched the ability to do that, one of my favorite features on Goodreads. And the reason for that is it really enables discussion at a deeper, more granular level than discussion of kind of the book as a whole, which is what a lot of Goodreads is, right? It's a review of the book of a whole. And, I saw you just read Hamilton, for instance. So I could ask you, hey, how was Hamilton? And you would give me, I don't know, a couple sentences about what you thought of it on the whole. Or you can kind of dive down into the specific annotations. And that's what I really find is a magical moment, when somebody else shares a bunch of annotations about a book you've read, and you can kind of dive back in and both kind of re-experience the book, but through somebody else's eyes, like, oh, they picked up on that. Interesting. I wouldn't have never picked up on that. And then you can ask them about it and kind of re-engage. And I could drone on for a while about how much I love it, because it's just fascinating. For instance, I saw you highlighted a phrase in Hamilton that you kind of said is an apt description of your own father, a lion at 90. And it kind of made me curious, like who was your father and what was he like, and how did that trigger, the description of Hamilton trigger that for you?
Yeah, it's like a personal door you open up to people, and he's a retired CEO of a bank, and he's still just so fiery with those values that I think that he was referencing there, the New England values. I noticed that you liked that comment, and I thought, oh, that's cool. You make some decisions about what you want to reveal about your reading when you do that. And I've been pretty careful choosing people that I follow and that are part of my Goodreads community that I know somehow, but they're not my 20 closest friends at this point. There's a wide group. And do you ever find yourself wondering if a note that you've made on something that you've read is too personal to put out there to your Goodreads community, or how do you decide what things you do and you don't share?
Good question. I think I started out doing what you described you did, which is I would go through my notes, and I might have 20 or 100 on a book, and kind of pick out a few that I thought I just highlighted for personal reference. And over the course of a year of using the feature, I've stopped doing that because I just found it's there wasn't a point to curating it. But what I do, and I think a lot of Goodreads power users are liking the feature for this reason, is it helps you write your review. So often my review will be kind of spread out across a bunch of annotations of what I thought of it. For instance, I'm reading Ray Dalio's Principles book right now, which is amazing. And my favorite chapter in it is where he talks about being radically transparent. And I think I had a quote in there where I wrote a whole paragraph around how that resonated. And I'm sure when I write my review in a couple weeks, whenever I finish it, I'll just go back to that annotation and be like, oh yeah, that was a big thought I had that I wanted to make sure I remembered for later. So I think that's a lot of the use case. If listeners aren't aware of how to find this feature,
yes, let's tell them.
All you have to do is read a book on Kindle and annotate it or highlight it, and then go to Goodreads. Well, actually, in Kindle for iOS, you can share it from there in your notebook. But if you're not on a Kindle for iOS, you go to Goodreads, and then in the header under your My Profile on the very right, there's a drop-down with a bunch of links, and one of those links is Kindle Notes and Highlights. And if you haven't connected your Goodreads and Kindle accounts or Amazon accounts, you just connect them, and then all the books you've ever annotated on Kindle appear. And it was kind of fun for me. I think I had maybe 100 because I've been reading on Kindle for a long time, and it was kind of fun to go back through them and share them all. And as I said, I started out trying to curate it and ended up just mostly sharing it all because there really isn't a point.
Yeah, I think I'm going to switch to that so that when I'm making notes, when I'm reading, I'm going to write them at sort of the Goodreads level of sharing so I won't have to go back and curate them.
It kind of shares the conceit of how you read now is the other interesting thing, because we have all of our, all of the employees at Goodreads use this feature. And now as you share an annotation, you're kind of aware that other people are going to see it, which is before when I read a book and highlight, it was more for yourself. And I find myself trying to say witty things or add value to a comment that I clearly I have an audience in mind when I'm saying, and I think that's a very interesting thing.
I think it's going to be helpful to me because sometimes when I'm reading, I get cranky and I'll say sort of, I don't know, sarcastic things that are not coming from my higher angels. And if I know that it's going to end up on Goodreads, I just won't even write those things down, which is probably better for my soul.
Oh, maybe there'll be interesting points to discuss.
I suppose that's true. Be a little more transparent. One thing that I can tell how complete the integration is because when I was on my Goodreads notes, and I did want to make a change on one of the Hamilton notes. In fact, I think it was the one that you read about my father. And so I typed it in the note on my Goodreads Kindle Notes and Highlights. And then I checked back on the book on my Fire HD8, I don't know, 3-4 minutes later. And in the book itself, that note had changed because I had changed it in my list of notes in Goodreads. So it's a pretty tight integration you've pulled off.
Yeah, I won't tell you about how complex that annotation database is in Amazon, but we are using the same database to store annotations in both places.
Well, not to make it even more complicated for you, but I had a reader sort of dreaming out loud saying, I love this annotations and notes being shared with Goodreads. Wouldn't it be cool if as I was making a note reading my book, it was in real time updating what people could see on their Kindle through Goodreads? Maybe initially just they could see that my Goodreads notes had changed, but that kind of image of reading a book together with someone so that as you were going through, you'd say, oh, I see Otis highlighted this, and he just left a note about this, to where that whole social experience might become even more intimate.
That's a good thought, or a very interesting thought to us, I'd say. And the way I think about the world, or how we're intervening with Kindle, is people often use the phrase social reading to describe this, and I hate that phrase.
Why?
Because I think it's just not true. You don't read socially.
Yeah.
I mean, the exception maybe of children's books, where you do read a book over the shoulder of somebody. People read alone, and then for as long as there have been books, after you've done reading, you go talk about the ideas, the stories, the concepts that you read about. That's actually a good metaphor for Goodreads and Kindle, right? Kindle is where you read alone. Goodreads is where you go talk about what you read, and then find your next read. And so I think we have a tenet at Kindle, by the way, which is, we never want to interrupt that magical experience of being able to lose yourself in a book.
Right.
And I think for the Kindle product, that's incredibly important. And, those popular highlight that contain in Kindle, it's kind of interesting if you do usability on those. Some people love those, some people hate those because they find it interruptive. So I think whatever we do going forward, we have to kind of abide by the sacrosanct experiences of, I want a good place to discuss what I've read, and I want a good place to just lose myself in a book. And, our challenge is, how do we enable you to do both seamlessly, but in the appropriate place?
Yeah, you have the transition from one to the other almost frictionless at this point. It's so easy to go from the private experience to the sharing, and that's got to increase the amount of time people spend sharing.
So you might have seen that in October we launched a pretty big, exciting feature on Kindle for iOS, which is the community tab. So if you go
I think I missed that. Tell me about that?
Oh, we're not doing our job then. The community tab is basically just the ability to see your Goodreads feed in the Kindle iOS app, which is, a place where a lot of readers are using. We're living in an increasingly mobile-first world, and a lot of people like to supplement their reading with an app, or for some people, the app is the main way they read. And now you can tap on the community app tab, and we've done a couple cool things there. One is, as you're sharing your notes, as you're sharing what you're reading, it just populates your Goodreads profile, and you can see a whole feed of what your friends are reading, and they can see what you're reading and what notes you're sharing and what notes they're sharing, all in that feed. So that alone is pretty cool. And then a second thing we did was, you kind of alluded to this actually. How many of your real life friends do you like their taste in books?
I don't know, 3. I don't have that. I don't have as many friends as you have to start with, so it's a small number of a small number.
That is actually the average. It's like 2 or 3. That's what most people say. And, that might vary if you ask about different genres. I have 2 or 3 history people and 2 or 3 sci-fi people.
Yeah.
But people don't have a lot of real life friends whose reading tastes they really care about. And that's been a big learning in Goodreads for us over the last, 5-6 years too, is what actually tends to work better is connecting them with people they don't know in the community who have the same taste in reading, who might read that rare, Hamilton-esque history books and be really into that. And they don't need to know them to be able to have a connection and have a conversation or just find new books through that other person. Because, hey, if it turns out somebody else has read 10 books that I like, and I look at what else they've read, there's probably some gems in there. So we find that Goodreads becomes more of a community, and that ends up being a better way to find books and also connect to people.
One way that I've used Goodreads that has really pleased me and made me feel the value of it is I'll start a book. I'm reading this book, Happy Dreams by Jia Pinghua, and it's a long book. It's set in China, and it's really slow. I read it and I fall asleep, or I love the writing, and there's a lot about it I like. And sometimes when I'm in a book like that I'm just not understanding if I like it or if it's a good book, whatever, I'll go to Goodreads and I'll check what people are saying, my friends, and just in general. And I very quickly, in this case, found people saying exactly the same thing. They were confirming, this is a book where not much happens, but it gives you an incredibly intimate view of what it's like to be in kind of the underclass in a big, huge Chinese city. And that it will reward you if you stay with it and just and stick with it. So I came back to the book with my feelings about it confirmed, and I really am reading the book with new appreciation. And it's a book that on my own, I might have just bailed on. I might have said, I don't get this book. I don't understand why I'm resisting it. But because I could tap into other readers that share some of my interests, I got a boost toward reading a book that I might otherwise have not given a full chance.
That's an amazing story. I love that. And what's unique about that is you did it while reading.
Yeah.
I like to say that a lot of people value Goodreads before and after reading. I've heard of a book. Should I read it? A famous author once told me that He always points his readers to Goodreads because he said you learn more about what a book is about by reading the Goodreads reviews than anything else. Yeah. And that was quite a famous author. I met him at a cocktail party in New York, and I was ready to be bow down to him and be like, oh my gosh. And like, I love Goodreads. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But it's the reviews. The reviews are amazing. I think we have the best reviews anywhere on the planet, and that's what they help you do. They help you get a sense of a book.
And it's so easy because on my Kindle Oasis, I'm in that book. I just tap the Goodreads. I tap on the top of the screen. I tap on the Goodreads icon, and I'm there. So it couldn't be handier to use Goodreads while I'm reading the book. Yeah.
Oh, so I forgot to close the loop. So in the new iOS integration, we're now experimenting with the community. So I talked about connect you beyond those 3 real life friends. Now we're throwing out popular reviewers you might want to follow in genres you care about. So we'll throw out one of the top reviewers who might have read history books, and you can see his recent reviews or her recent reviews and follow them. And so I think that's a direction we're interested in getting better at, is how do we help you connect to those like-minded readers easily versus making you go seek them out, which is what a lot of people who value about Goodreads do now.
At this point, we got the word from Suzanne Skyvara, who helped set up the interview with me at Goodreads with Otis, that he had an appointment coming up in just a few minutes, so I just had time for one last question. You just turned 40 a while ago. When are you going to retire?
Well, thank you for broadcasting my age. I think I'll retire when the Goodreads mission has been accomplished, which is everyone in the world is finding great books and sharing them with their friends, and then I'll be done. But that's I think that's going to take a long, long time. And I really am fortunate in that I love what I do. I get to work on spreading a love of reading throughout the world, and I get to think about what is the product that will do that? What is the product of a book? What is the future of a book? It's been exciting to work with the Kindle team on just what should books be in the future. And I just find those problems fascinating.
I have been speaking with Otis Chandler, co-founder and CEO of Goodreads. Thanks very much, Otis.
All right. Thank you for having me, Len.
I'm going to play that recording that I made in Austin at Book People under the content heading because the event highlighted a couple of good books to check out if you like mystery thrillers. The first is Brad Parks' Closer Than You Know, which he talked about 3 weeks ago here on the show. The other is Shadow Shepherd by Chad Zunker. My cousin Peter and I were among about 25 people in the audience for the session. It wasn't a traditional reading. It was more dialogue between 2 authors who had apparently bonded over supper beforehand and were quite friendly with each other. When I realized that Chad was published by Thomas and Mercer, the mysteries imprint of Amazon Publishing, I knew I was going to have to ask a question as soon as the Q&A began. When I raised my hand, Brad provided a kind of over-the-top but still appreciated acknowledgement of my affiliation. He's a kind of a showman at these events, and this is how he responded when he saw my hand in the air.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet Len Edgerly of the Kindle Chronicles.
Thank you very much.
You like that?
You two are published by very different publishers. Chad, your Thomas & Mercer is an imprint of Amazon Publishing, right, and Dutton is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And I'd love to just hear you talk about, each of you, the pros and cons of your experience with your publisher. Chad, maybe you could start.
I love my publisher so much. I can't compare because I haven't been with what is called the traditional publishing houses, but I think what I enjoy so much about my publisher, filled with great people. Obviously, they know how to sell books, which is the most important thing to me, and reach readers because it's unique. So since my imprint's owned by Amazon, means that the owner of my imprint owns the retail store, and so the difference would be a lot of my sales predominantly are in the digital market. Ebooks are huge, although we're gaining ground and thanks to guys like Scott and all that in the hardcover and paperback roles. But I think everything else about the process, I think it's where their focus is on selling books and how they go about it, and the mechanisms they have in place are different and really work well for me, especially trying to get started in this industry. But everything else about the process, I think, is the same, with great editors and working through, great developmental editors and copy editors and great cover designers and all that kind of stuff. But this is another area that's different. Like Brad's on a 20-city whirlwind book tour, but this is like my first book deal. My publisher just doesn't have a heavy emphasis on the book tours and all that. A lot of their promotional stuff is happening just through online, through their social media circles, through the platform they own on Amazon, and
through their many mind control devices,
and through the way that Amazon dominates the world. So I love it, and I hope to be with them for a long time, and they've been so very, very good to me, and so far so good.
What Chad doesn't realize is Amazon right now is developing an app that can write novels. So they're going to be replacing him very, very soon. So enjoy this ride.
I believe that,
you can,
and I'm trying.
God, the robots whose egos they won't have to stroke incessantly like they do with you. Yes, let's be clear. Chad's publisher is going to own everything someday. So eventually I'm going to be crawling to Chad and be like, hey, buddy, remember that fun night we had in Austin? Could you introduce me to your editor? I love being with Dutton. And I'm not just saying that because I fear you're recording this. Dutton is, they call themselves what is their slogan? A small list with a big audience. They're maybe a huge audience or something like that. So, they only publish about 40 books a year at Dutton, and that's not a lot. And so I'm the only thriller they're publishing this month. So that's cool. I'm their guy, they send me around, and my wife gets to get rid of me for a couple of weeks, which she enjoys. And I've had nothing but a good experience there. So I think we have very different worlds, and we're in a fascinating time in the industry. There's no question about that. And you sort of, I think there's going to be room for all of us at the table, and I don't. What I think everybody is realizing ultimately is we're not competing. Just because he is with this one business model and I'm with the traditional one, Chad and I are colleagues, right, not competitors. And the competition is the movie theater down the street. It's the Candy Crush app you have in your pocket. It's all the other things that people can do with their leisure time. And by the way, we can also, as fast as we may be, we can only write so many books, right? And you guys can read a lot more than one book a year. And so, I really am excited by by the infusion of Amazon, by the conventional, I want everybody's reading experience to be as strong as possible, so that you guys are spending more time with books and less time with all those other things you could be doing with your leisure time. And so I kind of see us as all being in the same boat. And if we can all write great books and get you excited about those books, we all win.
So there you have it. One publisher prices the ebook version of a new thriller at $3.99 and includes it for free lending with Kindle Unlimited. The other prices the Kindle version at $12.99. Despite the 22-city book tour that Brad is still on and the lead he has in published books compared with Chad, 8 versus 2, the Amazon publishing title is holding its own in the rankings at Amazon.com. Shadow Leopard is ranked at 16,725 in the paid-in Kindle store category, while Brad Parks is Closer Than You Know is more than 1,000 books behind, or levels behind, at 17,733. The Amazon publishing book came out 6 months ago, and the Dutton Penguin Random House title was released 3 weeks ago on March 6th. I would love to see a comparison, maybe by Data Guy, of author earnings to track estimated sales on a comparable basis for the first month or two after publication of each of these books, and then maybe another comparison a year after the publication dates. I did like Brad's summary of how authors are in the same quest to maintain the appeal of books no matter which publishing model they are using. That's it for this week. Next week's guest will be Elizabeth George, the author of The Punishment She Deserves, released last week by Viking, another imprint of Penguin Random House. It's the 20th in her Detective Linley series set in England. Darlene finished the advanced reader copy on my Kindle Oasis a few days ago, and she was delighted with the story. I'm a slower reader. It's a 700-page book. I'm reading it on the copy that I purchased once it was released. It's rare that we both like a book as much, so you might like it too. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from downtown Denver. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.